Let's hone in on this now. The ANC's National Working Committee resolving that members of the party facing criminal charges must step aside and must be suspended if they don't. The NWC held a meeting on Monday following submissions made by provinces on members who have been affected by the implementation of this contentious resolution. Officials, you'll remember, were given 30 days to step down, which expired last week already. Mbali Thethani is following all these developments as they take place. She joins us now to break it down for us, if she can. And I only say that, Mbali, because I've seen Pule Mabi yesterday doing a whole host of interviews across various platforms. And I must admit, even today, I'm not quite sure what that announcement is actually saying that is significant and what actually happens to the people affected by this resolution next.
Well, Ayanda, it's still a very confusing time for most of us, because you'd know that, just saying there in your intro, that 30-day period passed last week. They've reached their deadline, and now seeing the NWC sitting on Monday, we now have some sort of development, and that development is saying that those who don't step aside within the 30-day period will then be handed those letters of suspension. But Ayanda, no one has really been given that letter of suspension just yet, and we know that the NWC doesn't really take decisions, so we know that these decisions will need to be taken by the NEC. So it's only natural now that we see that these resolutions, or what has been resolved by the NWC, will of course now go to the NEC, and we know that the NEC is expected to meet over the weekend. And we know that this has been a very tricky time for the ANC, and this whole process, Ayanda, started of course when provinces were asked to submit those names of their officials who they think have these criminal charges against them and will need to step aside in the next 30 days or so. Of course, that has already passed, Ayanda. So we find ourselves now in this situation where they are sitting with these names which have been submitted, but really nobody has really stepped aside, Ayanda. But of course, speaking to a number of officials, speaking to a number of analysts, they are saying that why is it so difficult for the ANC to be implementing these resolutions is that it is a new resolution, and they don't want to actually be seeing court cases mushrooming from the step-aside resolution, and they being really careful and they being thorough in terms of how they will carry out this resolution. But I think, you know, Ayanda, heading into the week, the ANC, the NEC is expected to meet from Saturday until Monday. I think much then only, we will only see clarity when it comes to the decision that only doesn't affect a number of their officials, it affects the Secretary General's office.
We'll speak about why that's important, especially procedurally, about the issuing of these suspension letters. But I just want to hone in on what your analysts have told you, which I think, by the way, they're being very generous. The reason why this is confusing is because, number one, we're told that letters of suspension will be sent if the 30 days lapse and people haven't stepped down. The 30 days have lapsed and people haven't stepped down, but those letters also haven't been issued.
Ayanda, you'd remember on Sunday, right here on Newzroom Afrika, there was the interview done with the ANC national chairperson. Yeah. And he basically said that, well, they are giving them a bit of more time, and because they need time to deliberate, you know, on the next steps. And of course, it was clear. It was 30 days, you step aside. But it seems as if it's not that clear. We saw Gwede Mantashe, they're also saying that they've given the SG a bit more time to continue to consult. We know that Ace Magashule has consulted with a number of former leaders. We know Thabo Mbeki as well as former President Jacob Zuma. We also know that he has also consulted with Kgalema Motlanthe. So when you look at the amount of time that they are giving him to, of course, look into this issue, one would say that they are being very careful. It is the office of the Secretary General which is being affected here. So, you know, they are trying to be very careful in terms of how this will be carried out. But some people would say, well, it is quite clear, you know, officials need to step aside. We saw President Cyril Ramaphosa last week at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry rubber stamping, saying that we need to take action. There is now this whole process that they have agreed to implement, and these are their own resolutions, Ayanda, from the 54th conference. So they need to implement their own resolutions.
Right. Let's speak a bit more about the SG himself, who I think has quite unfairly in some instances, become the face of this resolution. We know it affects a whole host of other people as well. He becomes particularly significant for this step of the process because we're told these letters are meant to come from the office of the SG. He happens to be among the people implicated. The obvious question becomes, who issues a letter to him?
Of course, and that's the question that was posed to Pule Mabe yesterday, and all we got was that, well, look, it is an internal matter, and of course, this will be something that it will be dealt with internally. And we know, Ayanda, that, you know, like you say, and this is something that the ANC keeps on saying, that it's not a matter of the Secretary General, but we know that he is the highest official in that list, facing, you know, this resolution. And of course, it will seemingly become about the Secretary General.
Yeah, well, there's also the former President Jacob Zuma, but I get you. He's still occupying an office in Luthuli House specifically. Yeah.
And that's right, Ayanda. Of course, you know, he is facing these charges. He is facing this issue around stepping aside. So, of course, you know, it will be, the spotlight will shine quite boldly on him. But we know, even with the Secretary General, we've spoken to him on numerous occasions, asked him the questions, well, SG, when are you stepping aside? Are you stepping aside? That's a question he has not been willing to answer to a number of journalists, even as direct as that question is, you know, and it has been quite difficult to get him to answer that. And when you look back at Secretary General U.S. Magashule, you'd remember that when he was outside Bloem, he said that it is, of course, the branches of the ANC who have the powers to tell him to step aside. With an interview with Newzroom Afrika, he also said that, well, I don't believe that someone should step aside over allegations. They are just allegations. One should go to court and then be proven guilty. And then only once that process has been carried out, then you should step aside. So he has been quite clear, you know, even though he's not saying it now, but he has been quite clear that he doesn't believe that one should step aside over allegations, and of course stepping aside if you are in a court process, Ayanda.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, that said, you know, despite all my skepticism, many would argue that there has been movement taking place, especially in KZN. Mike Mabuya-Kulu, he's finally stepped aside, and in some respects one gets a sense that perhaps he's providing the blueprint of how all of this should unfold.
Of course, we are now seeing this major development coming out from KZN, and you're right, it is Mike Mabuya-Kulu. He has, of course, communicated with the ANC, saying that he will step aside. You know, question is, will we start seeing more people bringing their names to the fore? Ayanda, it's something that we will continue to monitor throughout the week.
All right, for better or for worse, Mbali, Thethani, thanks very much indeed. We'll have to watch the space and see how it all unfolds. Of course, in some respects, we're all counting down to this weekend. That's when the ANC NEC is set to meet. Hopefully, some kind of decision will emerge from that and give us an understanding of when these letters will be sent, but more specifically, who will send the letter to, specifically Ace Magashule, as the SG who is implicated in this process. I'm sure you're following it all with us. If you still do have the appetite, we'll bring those developments to you, no doubt, as soon as they take place.